Hello everyone. This morning I am going to be reading a chapter out of Rule by Secrecy. I'm going to be reading Council on Foreign Relations. It is about 8 pages long in this chapter. Council on Foreign Relations, here we go. Globalism did not begin with the Trilateral Commission. The concept of a one-world community stretches back far beyond the 20th century, but became concentrated in the granddaddy of the modern American secret societies. The Council on Foreign Relations, the Council began as an outgrowth of a series of meetings conducted during World War I. In 1917 New York, Colonel Edward Mandell House, President Woodrow Wilson, confidential advisor, had gathered about 100 prominent men to discuss the post-war world, dubbing themselves the Inquiry. They made plans for a peace settlement, which eventually evolved into Wilson's famous 14 points, which he first presented to Congress on January 8, 1918. They were globalist in nature, calling for the removal of all economic barriers between nations, equality of trade conditions, in the formation of a general association of nations. Colonel House, who once described himself as a Marxist socialist, but whose actions more reflected Fabian socialism, was the author of a 1912 book entitled Philip Drew Administrator. In this work, House described a conspiracy within the United States with the goals of establishing a central bank, a graduated income tax, and the control of both political parties. 2 years after the publication of his book, 2 if not all 3 of his literary goals had been met in reality. By late 1918, stalemate on the Western Front in the entry of America into the war forced Germany and the Central Powers to accept Wilson's terms for peace. The subsequent Paris Peace Conference of 1919 resulted in the harsh Treaty of Versailles, which forced Germany to pay heavy reparations to the Allies. This ruined the German economy, leading to depression and the eventual rise of Adolf Hitler and his Nazis. Attending the Paris Peace Conference were President Woodrow Wilson and his closest advisors, Colonel House, banker Paul Warburg, and Bernard Baruch, and almost 24 members of the Inquiry. The conference attendees embraced Wilson's plan for peace, including the formation of a League of Nations. However, under law, the covenant had to be ratified by the U.S. Senate, which failed to do so, apparently distrusting any supranational organization. Undaunted, Colonel House, along with both British and American Peace Conference delegates, met in Paris' Majestic Hotel on May 30th, 1919, and resolved to form an Institute of International Affairs, which one branch in the United States and one in England. The English branch became the Royal Institute of International Affairs. The institute was to guide public opinion toward acceptance of one world government or globalism. The U.S. branch was incorporated on July 21st, 1921, as a Council on Foreign Relations. It was built upon an existing but lackluster New York's dinner club of the same name, which had been created in 1918 by prominent bankers and lawyers for discussions on trade and international finance. Article 2 of the new CFR's bylaws stated that anyone revealing details of CFR meetings in contravention of the CFR's rules could be dropped from membership, thus qualifying the CFR as a secret society. This secrecy has been assiduously protected by America's major media. Analysis of the Soviet press say the Council crops more regularly in Pravda in Izvestia than it does in New York Times, noted journalist J. Anthony Lucas in 1971. Since 1945, the CFR has been headquartered in the Elegant Harold Pratt House in New York City. The building was donated by the Pratt family by Rockefeller's Standard Oil. The mansion, with its painted French doors, elegant tapestries, and fireplaces, presents a club-like atmosphere. Characterization of the CFR as an old boys club is enhanced by the fact that many members belong to other upper crust social register groups such as the Century Association, the Lynx Club, the University Club, the Washington's Metropolitan Club. In the CFR's 1997 annual report, Board Chairman Peter G. Peterson acknowledged that there was a kernel of truth to the charge that the Council was an organization of New York liberal elite, but stated the CFR today is reaching further into America, with an increasing number of members now living outside New York and Washington. The CFR's invitation-only membership, originally limited to 1,600 participants, today members more than 3,300, representing the most influential leaders in finance, commerce, communications, and academia. Admission is a very discriminating and painful process. Candidates have to be proposed by a member, seconded by another member, approved by a membership committee, screened by the professional staff, and finally approved by the board of directors. Let's stop right there. That's a lot of initiation to go through. In an effort to adjust to the modern world, the Council extended its membership by the early 1970s to include a few blacks and more than a dozen women, to broaden its influence beyond the eastern seaboard. And the CFR created committees on foreign relations composed of local leaders in cities across the nation. More than 37 in such committees comprising of about 4,000 members existed by the early 1980s. Original CFR members included Colonel House, former New York Senator and Secretary of State, Elihu Root, syndicated columnist Walter Lippmann, John Foster Dulles, and Christian Harder, who both later served as Secretaries of State. And Dulles' brother Allen, who later served as Director of the CIA. Founding CFR President millionaire John D. W. Davis was financier J.P. Morgan's personal attorney, while Vice President Paul Cravath also represent Morgan Properties. The Council's first chairman was Russell Leffingwell, one of Morgan's partners, since most of the earliest CFR members had connections to Morgan's in one way or another. It could be said that the Council was heavily influenced by Morgan interests. Funding for the CFR came from bankers and financiers such as Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, Bernard Baruch, Jacob Schiff, Otto Kahn, and Paul Warburg. Today, funding for the CFR comes from major corporations such as Xerox, Xerox, General Motors, Bristol Myers Squibb, Texaco, and others, as well as the German Marshall Fund, McKnight Foundation, Dillon Fund, Ford Foundation, Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Star Foundation, and the Pew Charitable Trust. According to the Capital Research Center Guide to Nonprofit Advocacy and Policy Group, CFR board members are associated with such Influential organizations is the Committee for Economic and Development Institute for International Economics, Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, and Business Enterprise Trust, the Urban Institute. The Business Roundtable, Council on Competitiveness, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, National Alliance for Business, and Brookings Institution, Business Higher Education Forum, Washington Institute for Near East Policy, Ethics and Public Policy Center, Hoover Institution, Center for Strategic and International Studies, Wilderness Society, and the American Council for Capital Formation. The CFR played a key role in American policy during World War II, and journalist J. Anthony Lucas noted from 1945 well into the 60s, council members were in the forefront of America's globalist activism. In a 1997 emission statement, CFR officials, whose ranks include nearly all past and present senior U.S. government officials who deal with international matters, stated the Council is merely a unique membership organization and think tank that educates members and staff to serve the nation with ideas for a better and safer world. Critics dispute this goal, noting that the CFR has had its hand in every major 20th century conflict. Many writers view the CFR as a group of men set on world domination through multinational business, international treaties, and world government. Even insiders seem to have a hard time convincing their fellows that there is no attempt at conspiratorial control. Admiral Chester Ward, retired judge, advocate general of the U.S. Navy, and a longtime CFR member, was quoted saying, "CFR as such does not write the platforms of both political parties, select their respective presidential candidates, or control U.S. defense and foreign policies. But the CFR members as individuals acting to concert with other individual CFR members do," journalist Lucas agreed, commenting that even if one rejects a simple-minded dictatorial view of the CFR, one must also recognize that influence flows as well through more intricate channels. The personal ties forged among men whose paths have crossed time and time again. In locker rooms, officers' messes, faculty clubs, embassy conference rooms, garden parties, squash courts, and boardrooms. If the Council has influence, and the evidence suggests that it does, then it is the influence its members bring to bear through such channels. Admiral Ward went on to explain that the one common objective of CFR's members is to bring about the surrender of the sovereignty and the national independence of the United States. Primarily, they want the world banking monopoly from whatever power ends up in the control of global government, Ward added. He detailed CFR methods in a 1975 book co-authored with Phyllis Schlafly titled Kissinger on the Couch. Once the ruling members of the CFR have decided that the U.S. government should adopt a practical policy, the very substantial research facilities of CFR are put to work to develop arguments, intellectual and emotional, to support the new policy and to confound and discredit intellectually and politically any opposition, he explained. The public manifestation of the CFR is his publication Foreign Affairs, termed informally the voice of the U.S. foreign policy establishment. Although Council supporters claim our articles in Foreign Affairs do not reflect any conscious consensus of beliefs, critics counter that the CFR signals members to its desired policies through such articles. Even the stodgy Encyclopedia Britannica admitted ideas put forward tenaciously is in this journal often, if well received by the Foreign Affairs community, appear later as U.S. government policy or legislation. Prospective policies that fail that testify usually disappear. Or prospective policies that fail this test usually disappear. Elvin Moscow, a sympathetic biographer of the Rockefeller family, wrote more to the point, stating, "So august has been the membership of the council that it has been seen in some quarters as a heart of the Eastern establishment. When it comes to foreign affairs, it is the Eastern establishment. In fact, it is difficult to point to a single major policy in U.S. foreign affairs that has been established since President Wilson which was diametrically opposed to then current thinking in the Council on Foreign Relations. Emphasis in the original. The Council has two methods of communicating the thoughts and desires of its inner circle of leadership: regular luncheon or dinner. Meetings where prominent thinkers and leaders were ground. Meetings were prominent thinkers and leaders from around the world addressed council members and council study groups that periodically present positions, papers on subjects of interest. The council also offers a corporation service through which subscribing companies are provided twice a year dinner briefing by government officials such as the Treasury Secretary or CIA Director, noted author John Kenneth Galbraith, who resigned from the CFR in 1970 out of boredom, called such off-the-record talks a scandal. Why would businessmen be briefed by government officials on information not available to the public, especially since it can be financially advantageous, he reasoned. Author G. Edward Griffin agreed that initially the CFR, as a front for the British Round Table Group, was dominated by the J.P. Morgan family. The Morgan Group gradually has been replaced by the Rockefeller Consortium, and the roll call of participating businesses now reads like the Fortune 500, he wrote in 1944. One example of Rockefeller domination of the CFR came in the early 1970s when David Rockefeller went over the heads of a nominating committee and offered the editorialship of Foreign Affairs to William Bundy, a former CIA official instrumental in prosecuting the Vietnam War, demonstrating how every U.S. government administration since the Council inception has been packed with CFR members. Conservative journalist and CFR researcher James Perloff noted, the historical record speaks even more loudly. Through 1988, 14 secretaries of the state, 14 treasury secretaries, 11 defense secretaries, and scores of other federal department heads have been CFR members. Nearly every CIA director since Allen Dulles has been a CFR member, including Richard Helms, William Colby, George Bush, William Webster, James Woolsey, John Dush, and William Casey. Many of the council's members have a personal financial interest in foreign relations, noted researcher Laurie Strand, because it is their property and investments that are guarded by the State Department and the military and the CIA. Many researchers have alleged that the CIA, in fact, serves as a security force not only for corporate America, but for friends, relatives, and fraternity brothers of the CFR. This may be a two-way street, or according to a former executive assistant to the deputy director of the CIA, Victor Marchetti, along with former State Department analyst John D. Marks. The influential but private council composed of several hundred of the country's top political, military, business, and academic leaders has long been the CIA's principal constituency. In the American public, when the agency has needed prominent citizens to front for its propriety companies or for other social assistance, it has often turned to council members. CFR members who take the government positions tend to bring in fellow members. When CFR member Henry Stimson came to Washington as Secretary of War in 1940, he brought with him fellow member John J. McCloy, an Assistant Secretary for Personnel. McCloy, in turn, did his part over the years to bring more CFR members to government. Whenever we needed a new man for a government position, we just thumbed through the roll of council members and put through a call to New York. Once commented McCloy, a former CFR chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank, mentor to David Rockefeller, and himself foreign policy advisor to 6 U.S. presidents. Another example of the influence of the CFR can be seen in the metric rise of Henry Kissinger. In 1955, Kissinger was merely another unknown academic who attended a meeting at the Marine Corps School in Quantico, Virginia. Hosted by then Presidential Foreign Affairs Assistant Nelson Rockefeller, this meeting was the start of a lengthy friendship between the two, culminating in a $50,000 outright gift to Kissinger from Rockefeller. Kissinger soon was introduced to David Rockefeller and other prominent CFR members. Through the CFR, Kissinger obtained funding and entry to ranking officials of the Atomic Energy Commission. The three branches of the military, the CIA, and the State Department, used this access to produce a best-selling book entitled Nuclear Weapons and Foreign Policy, in which he argued that a nuclear war might be winnable by the time of Nixon's administration. Kissinger was Secretary of State, and he remains a formidable force in world affairs. According to published reports, the Clinton administration was top-heavy with more than 100 CFR members helping to begin the Clinton years. CFR members were named ambassadors to Spain, Great Britain, Australia, Chile, Syria, South Africa, Russia, Romania, Japan, Korea, Mexico, Italy, India, France, Czech Republic, Poland, Nigeria, and the Philippines. Currently, more than a dozen members of both the House and Senate are CFR members. Author Robert Anton Wilson commented, if the CFR had millions of members like say the Presbyterian Church, this list might not mean much, but the CFR only has 3,200 members. Because of its Wall Street banking origins and its inherent secrecy, the Council on Foreign Relations came under a strident attack by conservative writers. This public attention led to the creation of the less secretive Trilateral Commission. Public awareness of the pervasive CFR presence in government became so widespread that the late Gary Allen, whose book on globalist organizations, none dare call it conspiracy, sold more than 5 million copies despite being ignored by the establishment media. Commented just before the 1972, 5 million media commented just before the 1972 national elections, there really was not a dime's worth of difference between presidential candidates. Voters were given the choice between CFR world government advocate Nixon and CFR world government advocate Humphrey. Only the rhetoric was changed to fool the public. In a call to action, Allen echoed the admonition of many researchers were suspicious of the CFR's motives when he wrote, "Democrats and Republicans must break the insider control of their respective parties. The CFR types of their flunkies and social climbing of opportunist supporters must be invited to leave, or else the patriots must leave." Many conspiracy researchers today see a parallel situation in the 2000 election, shaping up to be a contest between Democratic Al Gore and Republican George W. Bush, both of whom have long-standing business and family ties to Wall Street and CFR members. Author Perloff warned from a Christian perspective that a monumental battle is shaping up between the kingdom of Christ and an evil one-world government, the kingdom of the Antichrist. Many notables of the American establishment have given themselves over to one side in this conflict, and is not the side the ancient scriptures recommend. Whether or not they are conspirators, whether they are conscious or not of the ultimate consciousness of their actions, their powerful influence has helped move the world toward apocalyptic events. Clearly, the CFR has exerted a powerful influence, if not outright control, over U.S. policies for nearly the past century. But for almost 50 years, this influence has been shared with another closely connected secret group, the Bilderbergs. That was good stuff. Very, very good stuff. Of course, the next chapter is Bilderbergs. That was good stuff. I hope you all enjoyed that. Sorry for sometimes misinterpreting a word and trying to fix it quick. That was good. I'm going to do more of this. I'm going to find other chapters. There's so many chapters in this book. Again, it is Rule by Secrecy by Jim Marrs. We read the chapter in this book called Council on Foreign Relations. I hope we all learned something reading this. A lot of history, a lot of stuff that... There's a lot of CFR members. That's all I gotta say. I'm gonna shut this down and hope you all enjoyed. Thank you. God bless. In Jesus' name, amen.